So hey everybody, it's TR here, and welcome to the Hagerman Fossil Bed National Monument. This is a monument that was established in 1989, so it's about 25 years old or so. And it is dedicated to the fossils that they found related to the horse species. In the 20s, the Smithsonian Institution found horse fossils here. From those fossils, they were able to derive that the horse most likely evolved on this continent, if you will, the North American continent. But back in time, hundreds of thousands of years ago, there was a land bridge between the North American continent and the Eurasian continent, if you will, and horses were able to migrate into that region. They did thrive here on this continent, and so we have the horse we know today. The monument's pretty small. It's only like 3 or 4 miles long, and it's pretty much all closed because it's just young. It hasn't been developed a lot. There's a couple of overlooks that you could stop at, but only one that really overlooks the Snake River, which is probably the most beautiful side of it. However, over in this area, we are on the parts of the original Oregon Trail. Of course, I think a lot of folks probably know about the history of the Oregon Trail, how it passed through southern Idaho here, and how they struggled to cross the Snake River in several places. This is the route that they took to climb the canyon walls in their wagons to get to the top, where they had a little bit easier of a route because most of that up there is just blown in loess soil, and that's just decomposed volcanic material that moves on the wind here in Idaho like anything, and makes up most of the soils that we find here in these areas where you have lava. Future episodes, I plan on being down around the City of Rocks, which is also on the Oregon Trail. And then in another episode, we're going to be up on what's known as Goodale's Cutoff. And so rather than going south, they would go north and go up across the desert north of here about probably 100 miles or so. And I've spent a lot of time out on Goodale's Cutoff as well, and so that's pretty interesting, and we'll be getting up there one of these first days too. So if you want to see all of those, you want to make sure you get subscribed. And then if you like what you're seeing, give me that thumbs up, all right? So I'm just walking through here real quick, and if you saw one of my past episodes, the Bruno Overlook episode, we talked a lot about the plants that you see, and pretty much we're seeing the same thing in here. We've got a bunch of seeded crested wheatgrass, cheatgrass out the yin-yang. I'm also seeing some Poa bulbosa in here. There's also a ton of grasshoppers out here, so they're having a hatch on the grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are quite cyclical. I don't know if you can see them flying up in front of me here, but it's pretty fun to walk through them sometimes because they'll just be bouncing off you and all kinds of crazy stuff. So this area is really power rich, and what I mean by that is that up here on top of the bluff, or up on top of the canyon wall I should say, there's a lot of wind up there. The wind is constantly blowing, and so they've installed, I think it's something around 300 megawatts of wind turbines up there. We'll be stopping up here at the Snake River Overlook in just a minute. So right nearby too is the National Fish Hatchery, and we're going to stop by there because they raise Andromenous fish there. Andromenous fish are fish that go to the ocean and then return to their original place of birth to spawn again. And the National Fish Hatchery raises millions and millions of steelhead and salmon to release below the lower Columbia dams so that they can make it to the ocean and try to help repopulate the salmon spawning runs that used to come into Idaho many, many years ago but were stopped by the dams. I read a report many years ago that said they'd spend over $1 billion on salmon recovery, and they had just barely been seeing any results at all. But I think a lot of it is that these salmon, they go out to sea and they get growed up, and then they get harvested, and we eat them before they ever get the chance to migrate back up the Columbia River and into this drainage system, the Snake River system here, and then into the tributaries where they originate from. We had to cross over the Snake River and climb up the canyon wall to get to this spot, which is the Snake River Overlook. Down below us here is the Upper Salmon Falls Power Plant, and we'll be able to see that when we get up there to the Overlook. So instead of talking about it, let's go check it out. So I made it up here to the Overlook, and it's pretty nice. You can see the backwaters for another one of the power plants. It's on down the river there just a little ways. And then Hagerman, Idaho is just over here to my left, your right. that'll probably do it for this stop. This Hagerman Fossil Beds National Monument is pretty small. So hey everybody, TR back here with another quick stop along the road. If you look out over my shoulder here, you can see all these big, huge boulders just scattered everywhere across this big flat plain out here. And at a place called the Portneuf Gap, which is down here to the southeast of us, about 150 miles or so. Great Bonneville Lake that was covering most of Utah and some of northern Nevada and that area down in there, which now are the remnants of that are called the Great Salt Lake. But anyways, as I was saying, several 100,000 years ago, that gap broke open and this great flood happened. And these rocks are rocks that were carried from that flood. They were scoured off the canyon walls and carried along and then just deposited out here as the water slowed enough that it wasn't going fast enough to keep carrying these rocks. And now you see these big boulders just scattered across these fields out here. I know that when I lived in Pocatello, they were digging up house-sized boulders when they were trying to dig foundations for big buildings and so on and so forth. And Pocatello was, of course, very close to the Portneuf Gap. Now, as we get further out away from the Portneuf Gap, the boulders tend to get smaller and smaller. Funny side story is that a company called the Stinker Stations used to have these signs all over these areas out here where you see these big rocks, similar to the Burma Shave signs you might remember, you know, where they had these funny sayings on them. But the Stinker Station had their funny sayings too, and they called these things petrified watermelons. And on the sign, it invited you to take home one or two. So that'll do it for this episode. Until we meet again.